Hello, I'm Langston and I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2024 presidential election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. As we know, Kamala Harris is now the new presumptive Democratic nominee because Joe Biden just recently dropped out. Donald Trump has recently picked JD Vance to be his vice president. So I'm going to be filling out how I believe the election will go between them. So in 2022, I predicted every single last Senate race correctly. I was pretty similar on the House as well as some gubernatorial elections. I did expect for Katie Hobbs to lose as well as Tony Evers and Laura Kelly in Kansas. But for the most part, I was extremely accurate, especially in the Senate elections. But anyway, I'm going to be diving straight into it. So, starting off with the likely states for Donald Trump, I believe that Donald Trump will win Kansas as well as Alaska, Nebraska's first district, Iowa, Ohio, Maine second district, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Florida by 5 to 15% or a likely margin. So in Alaska, I do expect Donald Trump to lose ground here. He lost a lot of ground in 2020. He didn't really do so well in 2016 either in the state. Alaska is a very left trending state. I do expect for it to slow down. Like I think he'll win Alaska by like 8 or 9 points, maybe 7 or 8 at the best for Kamala Harris, but I believe it'd be like 8 or 9 points for Donald Trump. He won it by 10 in 2020, 14 in 2016. So with that, I do expect for the state to continue to trending to the left, but I do not think Kamala Harris is the strongest candidate for Alaska. I think Joe Biden is a stronger candidate for appealing to the moderate voter base in Alaska. In Kansas and Nebraska's first district, both of these areas I also expect to trend to the left. They're very suburban and college educated. Some of the demographics that Joe Biden wasn't really struggling with despite his issues. As you see, Johnson County trended 11 points to Democrats in 2020, as well as Lincoln, 7.6%, where Nebraska's first district, as you see these massive gains. You go to 2016 and you see that same story for the most part. So with that, like I do expect for that to continue. And with that, I do expect for Kansas and Nebraska's first district to narrow up. Nebraska's first district has been drawn to be a little bit more Democratic, so that will help as well. But I do expect for Donald Trump to still win these pretty convincingly. In Iowa and Ohio, I do think that Donald Trump would do excellent with the white working class. I think Kamala Harris is a pretty weak candidate for appealing to white working class, blue collar workers, in particular in Iowa. In Ohio, she has some demographics that will help her, but in Iowa, I don't realistically see Kamala Harris being strong anywhere. I think she'll do a little bit better with some young voters, some youth voters at college campuses, and et cetera. But statewide, I think Kamala Harris is an extremely weak candidate for Iowa. I think in Ohio, as well as Maine Second District, I think she also really struggles with the white working class in Maine Second District. And out in Ohio, I do think that yes, she bonds with the white working class, but I do think she'll do better with turning out black voters in like Cleveland and Columbus and inner cities. I think she'll keep up the trends in the suburbs in Delaware County. All the other upper class suburbs around Ohio. And I don't think that she will really bomb in Ohio, but I do expect for Donald Trump to hold his ground up there. I think that she, in a way, can help Sherrod Brown because I think that one of the biggest issues Democrats are worried about in Ohio is black turnout. And I think that she will help Sherrod Brown with that down ballot in the Senate race. In Florida, I don't think Kamala Harris is a strong candidate for Cuban voters in South Florida and Hispanic voters in South Florida in general. Also, I think Joe Biden is a stronger candidate for older voters in Florida. So I do think Kamala Harris will struggle in Florida. I think she'll keep up the trends in Duval County, and some of the other left trending parts of Florida. But for the most part, I do expect her to not perform the best in Florida. I think Trump will win there by 5 to 7 points, maybe 8 points at worst for Kamala. In Mississippi and South Carolina was about a 13-point margin back in 2020, I believe. And I believe that Mississippi was a 16-point margin. So I do expect for Kamala's success with black voters to continue in the South. So I do expect for her to lose Mississippi by like 14, maybe 15, maybe 13. South Carolina by like 11, maybe 12, maybe 10. That's the margins I expect, which are under 15%. So now I'm going to be categorizing the likely states for Kamala Harris, and she has New Mexico, she has Minnesota, she has Nebraska second district, Maine second, New Hampshire, as well as Virginia. So in New Mexico, I do expect for Kamala Harris to somewhat struggle I want to say somewhat struggle, but I don't think Kamala Harris is the strongest candidate for New Mexico. But considering how New Mexico's voted, 8 point margin for Hillary Clinton, 10 point margin, I'm sorry, 11 point margin for Joe Biden. I do expect her to win here by probably double digits, 11, 12%. But I don't think that she's the best candidate for the state. And Minnesota, I do think Kamala Harris will struggle with the white working class in Minnesota, which will definitely hurt. I think she'll lose some ground in the Iron Range. She could lose Lake County as well as Carlton County. Biden barely won those counties. I could definitely see her losing, as well as Winoma County. I could see her losing some counties in Minnesota. But where Kamala will do well will be in the Twin Cities. I think she's a lot better of a candidate for turning out voters in Minneapolis and Ramsey. Like, the pro Palestine movement has really warmed up to Kamala Harris as of recently. Like, a lot of these pro Palestine left wing younger voters, which were totally against Joe Biden, have really came along to Kamala Harris's side in the last couple of days. So, with that, like, it's going to be a place where Minneapolis, St. Paul will really help Kamala Harris in this election. I expect Alon Omar, someone who represents those districts, to be someone who will help Kamala Harris campaigning. She was very anti Joe Biden, but hasn't really been too much said about Kamala Harris from her perspective. So I think the Kamala Harris's support with young voters, with progressive voters in Minneapolis and St. Paul, should easily be enough to give Democrats more than a 5% victory in Minnesota. I expect Kamala to win Minnesota by 5 to 7%, roughly around that margin. I do think she'll lose ground in the working class areas, but I think that she'll do really well in the Twin Cities and keep up the trends in the suburbs. And New Hampshire and Maine, very similar. I think that Kamala Harris will do pretty well with college-educated voters. New Hampshire is allergic to Trumpism, and we've seen this, numerous times with Kamala Harris. I doubt that you don't see her win in these two states convincingly. But I do want to say in Maine's case, like she will absolutely bomb in Maine second district, but Maine statewide, she should perform pretty well. Probably 10% margin in Maine, 6 to 8% margin in New Hampshire. In Virginia, I do expect for her to keep up the trends in the DC suburbs, continue trending the DC suburbs to the left, do better with Black voters across the state of Virginia, which will probably bring her up to like an 11-point margin in the state, maybe 12%, somewhere around that margin. And those are the likely states for Kamala. So I have one lean state for Donald Trump, and that is Texas. So in Texas, I do expect for Donald Trump to win here, probably by 2 to 4 points, uh, probably around a 3 point margin for him. I do expect for Kamala to do a little bit better in Houston and Dallas than Joe Biden will be able to do in the inner cities with these specific types of voter bases. I do expect her to do a little bit better in San Antonio as well. I think that she will end up flipping Collin County. You see this county trend at 12% left in 2020. How much did it trend left in 2016? Wow. So she did 17 points better than Barack Obama in 2016, and Biden did 12 points better than Hillary. So I definitely expect Kamala Harris to do only 4 points better than Joe Biden in that county. I do think that she will lose Denton. I think Joe Biden would have won Denton County if he was running, but I expect Kamala Harris to. I don't think she's as strong in the suburbs as Joe Biden, but I definitely think that she's definitely strong enough to keep up the trends in the suburbs. But I do think that Trump can gain some ground with rural Hispanic voters, but he did that last time and his margin still shrunk statewide. So I do expect for him to his lead to narrow a little bit, but I still think he'll win Texas somewhat convincingly. In the lean states for Democrats, I have three. I think Kamala will win Nevada, Michigan, as well as Georgia by more than 1%. In Nevada, I do expect for Kamala Harris to hold up pretty well in Clark County. I think she'll probably win here by 8 to 10 points. I don't think she's as strong in Reno as Joe Biden, but Washoe is trending to the left, so I expect those trends to continue. I do think Trump would dominate in the rural areas, but I still expect for Kamala to win here by 2 to 3 points. A lot of people have been very delusional about Nevada. Like I've seen people talk about Republicans are going to win Nevada by 3, 4%, despite the fact that polls always underestimate Democrats in Nevada. For a Republican to win Nevada by like 3 or 4 points, 5 points, like some people are saying, that means that a Democrat would have to win Clark by like 1 or 2 points, maybe 3 points. Like that's how bad a Democrat would have to bomb Clark County, which is like ludicrous. It doesn't matter how bad things get. Like things really got bad for Steve Sisolak in 2022. He still won Clark by 5. He only lost Nevada by 1.5 points. And that was like as bad as things can get for Democrats in the state, R+5 electorate. So with that, like it's very hard to create a margin. I can see a scenario where Democrats get like a D+7 Clark County, but even a D+7 Clark County means that they either barely win or barely lose. It's like at worst they're losing by half a point. At best they're winning by half a point. So the scenario for Trump to be winning Nevada by these lopsided margins are very delusional to the absolute to the math and how Nevada works demographically and mathematically. Also, in Michigan, I do expect for Kamala Harris to perform somewhat well here. I think that she'll do pretty well with urban Black voters in Detroit as well as in Flint. I think that she'll keep up the trends in Oakland County and the suburbs of Michigan and Oakland as well as in Kent County. And that should allow her to have like a 2 to 3 point victory in Michigan. I can see it being maybe 1.5 points or et cetera. I do think Trump would dominate with the white working class in the state, but it won't be enough to overcome Black voters in inner cities as well as the suburbs, continue to trend to the left. A lot of people are delusional about Republicans' chances in Michigan as well. Like for Republicans to win Michigan, they need turnout in Detroit to collapse, and they need to stagnate the suburbs, which is something that Trump failed to do even in 2001. So if Republicans can't stop the suburbs from turning to the left, which they even failed to do against Hillary Clinton, they have no chance of winning Michigan in 2024, despite making massive improvements with Muslim voters and all the other arguments that you've heard the right wing say. In Georgia, Kamala Harris, I believe she'll win here probably by 1 to 2%. I could see it be like a 0.8, 0.9% margin like you saw from Warnock in the first round. A poll just came out recently, I believe, where it had Trump winning Georgia by 1%. It was a Republican leading poll. This poll had Trump winning by 4% in 2020 and also had Herschel Walker winning Georgia as well. So obviously the poll does shift a little bit in Democrats' favor. And for that poll to only have Kamala Harris down is a really bad thing for the Trump campaign. But I do want to say it is the first poll. We want to see a lot more polls that come out of Georgia. Also, I want to bring up the fact is a lot of people are talking about how the poll did underestimate Kamala Harris in Georgia, which I do agree with. But I think that people aren't talking about the fact that the poll only had Trump winning 64% of white voters, which I think is delusional. I do expect for Trump to win about 70% of white voters. So I think he will outperform the share of the white vote that the poll suggested he would win. But I also think that the poll only had Kamala Harris winning like 82% of black voters, which is like ludicrous. Like Kamala Harris would probably easily break 90 or at least get in the very high 80s. And also it only had her winning young voters by like 1 or 2%. It was an A plus poll. So with those factors and like you factor in all the variables, it probably leans to like a Kamala plus 2.5, Kamala plus two electorate. And with that, I do expect that to be similar to the result that we'll get. I do expect for Kamala Harris to do pretty well in the Atlanta metro area with Black voters, which are the predominant group in the area. I think that she'll keep up the trends in Gwinnett as well as in Cobb County, and that should help her. I could see her struggling in Forsyth, Hall, and Cherokee. You go to 2022, and you'll see Republicans held their ground here. Like, look at the shift. So Democrats only did 1 point better in Cherokee. They only did 1.8% better in Forsyth. And they actually lost ground in Hall County. So you see that Democrats didn't really make up too much ground there. I have seen that the Republican lieutenant governor of Georgia has endorsed Kamala Harris, but I don't think that will have a major impact in helping Kamala Harris with some moderate white voters in the state. I think that her best bet is to get the black share of the electorate to break 30% or be roughly 30% prior to the election. And that should be, well, way more than enough to carry her to victory in the state. I do expect for Trump to do really well with rural voters across the state, but I don't think it'll be enough to make up for his disadvantages and with the numbers that Kamala Harris would generate with black voters across the state would be way more than enough to surpass Trump's firewall. And now I'm going to move on to the tilt states. So I have two tilt states for Donald Trump, and those states are Wisconsin and North Carolina. A lot of polls have been showing Kamala Harris winning Wisconsin. Wisconsin has been Democrats' best polled state, which I kind of find delusional. I think a lot of people are very delusional about Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is Kamala Harris's weakest swing state, despite what the polls are saying. I do expect for Kamala Harris to do a lot better with black turnout in Milwaukee. I think that she'll do better with young voters in Madison. But I do expect for Trump to keep up these gains with rural working class voters. And what people don't talk about is like Trump is only getting 56, 66, 63, 60, 58. Like he has a lot of room to grow in these working class areas. Like you look at like Pennsylvania, for example, Trump is at 74. He's at 68. Like he's at 68. He's at 74. Like look at these margins, right? Like they're nowhere near that in Wisconsin. So Trump has a lot of room to grow in these working class areas. And against a candidate like Kamala Harris, who's very weak for the white working class, I expect him to do that. And I do expect Kamala Harris to do a little bit better in the wild counties, but I don't think it'll be enough. I don't think that her numbers in the wild counties, and I don't think she'll be able to generate enough turnout in Milwaukee and Madison to come out with a narrow victory in the state. But I do expect it to be close. I could see a scenario where Kamala Harris wins, but I don't think it's the most likely, despite what the polls are predicting. In North Carolina, another example, I think Kamala Harris has a much better chance of winning North Carolina than winning Wisconsin. North Carolina, Democrats have really been falling short in North Carolina primarily because they're not turning out the numbers of black voters they need to win. If Sherry Beasley would have done that, she would have won the Senate race, but she failed to do that. You can make the same argument for Mandela Barnes as well. But regardless, like I think in North Carolina, Kamala Harris has a lot more appeal, in particular in Charlotte and Raleigh. Like I think she could do better in the Research Triangle in the cities of Charlotte. I do expect for Trump to gain ground in the working class rural parts of North Carolina. I do expect for Kamala Harris to keep the suburban trends in North Carolina. I don't think that Kamala Harris will generate enough black turnout to win North Carolina. I think that she'll shift it to the left. But as of today, I don't think that she has the numbers to win North Carolina. I know her campaign, I know the Democrats are really focusing a lot of attention in North Carolina, so they could realistically win it this year. But I expect Trump to still prevail by like a 0.5, 0.4%, somewhere around that margin. So now we have the last two tilt states for Kamala Harris, and those states, in my opinion, are Arizona as well as Pennsylvania. Starting off in Arizona, Arizona's really a problem for Republicans. They've really been losing almost every major race in Arizona since 2018 federally. And, in Arizona, I do not think Kamala Harris is the best candidate for Arizona, but you don't really need to be a good candidate to win Arizona. I don't think Kamala Harris, like, you saw Hillary Clinton do 6 points better than Barack Obama in Arizona. Like, you saw Katie Hobbs win Arizona despite everything going wrong for her campaign. I just don't think Kamala Harris is weak enough of a candidate to lose in Arizona. Like, you see that Hillary Clinton she did 7 points better in Maricopa County than Obama. So we're looking at those numbers, like the math is really hard for Trump to win in Arizona. He lost Maricopa by two, and he needs to keep Maricopa at like D+2. Maybe he wants to make it like a D plus 1.8, D plus 1.7. But if he can keep it at D plus 2, I can see a scenario where he really improves with Hispanic voters in southwestern Arizona, and Kamala like really struggles to the point where he could barely win Arizona. But if Kamala just wins Maricopa by 3 points, like the math isn't there for Trump to make up statewide because Maricopa makes up so much of Arizona's electorate. And that's the problem for Republicans in Arizona. And a lot the, a lot of moderate Republicans have abandoned the Republican Party and have shifted to Democrats, as we've seen in Arizona. And you can't really gain those voters back. Like, for example, when Dixiecrats left the Democratic Party and went to Republicans, like they never came back, right? Like Southern Democrats used to vote Democrat, have never voted Democrat again. Like they've been shifting right, and they kept shifting right for decades. So there's nothing that Trump can really do to stop that from happening, especially with his rhetoric, with the rhetoric that Trump's been pushing out against women and et cetera. JD Vance in particular, like that's not going to really help him with moderate suburban voters in Maricopa County. So as of now, I do expect Kamala Harris to win Arizona by like point 0.8, maybe pushing a point. I can see her winning by a lean margin, but I still expect it to be like a Katie Hobbs kind of margin where she does a little bit better than Joe Biden, but she doesn't win by more than a point. In Pennsylvania, very similar. A recent poll, a Republican internal poll came out, only had Trump winning Pennsylvania by 2%, which is really a problem. As you see right here, North Star Opinion Republican pollster. This poll came out very recently. So in Pennsylvania, a problem for Donald Trump is the Philadelphia suburbs. Like, if he can't stop these suburbs from trending to the left, like he can't make up enough votes in the working class rural areas to counteract that. And Erie County, let's say he wins back Erie. Biden only won Erie by less than 2,000 votes. He won by 81,000 votes statewide. So you give those 2,000 votes back to Trump. Now Kamala's down to 79. Like you give Trump Northampton, Biden won here by almost another 2,000. Now she's down to 77. You cut the margin in Lackawanna by half. Biden won here by 9. You give Trump won at about 5,000 votes. Now she's down to 72,000, right? Isn't too many votes for Trump to squeeze out of these rural working class areas. But let's say that he gains another 30, 40,000 votes from these areas combined. That means Kamala's down to 30,000, right? And now you get down to the suburbs. Like these suburbs, like Kamala's gonna gain a little bit of votes here. If she gains, 10,000 votes out of Montgomery, she gains another 8,000 out of Chester, she gains another 10,000 out of Allegheny. Like that kind of negates everything that Trump gained back. And that's been kind of his problem. Like even in 2016, despite, Hillary Clinton losing, like she still did better in the Philadelphia suburbs. If you give her Biden's numbers in the suburbs, Hillary Clinton would have won Pennsylvania. So with Kamala Harris doing pretty well black voters in Philadelphia and keeping up the suburban trends, it makes it very hard for Trump to win Pennsylvania in a head-to-head matchup with her. Because Trump's strategy was he wanted to obviously improve with the white working class, do well with rural voters, which he would easily do against Kamala Harris, who's a bad working class candidate. But if Kamala gets good numbers in Philadelphia or even decent numbers and keeps up the trends in the suburbs, there's nothing Trump can do to really stop her from winning. And that's really a problem for him and his campaign going into this election. And I hear a lot of people talking about, well, fracking, fracking, fracking. Well, there aren't that many frackers in Pennsylvania. Like, there's more people that work in the Philadelphia suburbs in white collar jobs than frackers. There's way more black people in Philadelphia than frackers. So that's not going to be enough to stop the suburban trend in the Philadelphia suburbs. So that's all I have to say when predicting this election. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. Obviously, I have Kamala Harris winning 293 electoral votes and Trump winning 245 with Kamala Harris winning the presidency. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. Make sure to have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.